Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
My name is Chris Lee. I'm a member of this church since about 2010, 12, something like that. And the majority of that time, I have served on a committee in some capacity or the other, and about 4 years on the church council. Right now, I sit as the chair. And today, we're going to talk about the difference between what the committee looks like now versus the future, or possible future, depending on how we vote on this governing board that they're presenting. I love serving on the church council. I think it's great. The people there are awesome, and that's pretty much the best part about it. I also don't like serving on the church council, mainly because of time commitments. With this new change that we're proposing, neither of those things are going to change. There's still going to be good people. There's still going to be a time to call. But I'm not here to sway you either way. I just want to make sure that people are educated on what the change is, and you can make your own decision on whether it's a good change or not. One thing I will say is, don't be scared of change. The pandemic has taught me that this group, this congregation, can change and embraces change, and it can move very quickly. We have to make a lot of big decisions really quick when we have a pandemic. And I think we did a really great job. I was getting emails and phone calls from other churches all over Portland saying, how did you guys do it? And we were able to share our policies we came up with. So we have a really dedicated congregation that can adapt. So don't let that be a reason why you decide not to vote for this by account of structure. But that was just my little diatribe in the beginning. I'll get into what I'm supposed to talk about, which is Mission Possible. Governing board. This is part 5 of 5. This is the last one. That's all great. Thank you for spending time with us on your Memorial Day. I know there's a lot of things you could be doing besides being here. If you're online, thank you for being here and watching this. I know there's a lot of great things besides this. I think Star Wars just came out with the Obi-Wan movie series. Stranger Things came out with the series as well. So thank you for choosing this. You'll find your reward. So let's go ahead and switch over. So the governing board, I think the last meeting we had last Sunday, the best part of it was the questions that were raised. So this is the time during our discerning process, you can ask questions. Even if it's a really stupid question, it might at least inspire somebody else to have another question as well. So go ahead and ask it at the end. So governance responsibilities. The church committee council right now has responsibilities, but they're not always on. The SAS recommends that governing board, which is made up to 9 members, follow these for guidelines: stewardship, strategic, generative, and accountable leadership. And I'll break those down for us a little bit here in the next coming slides. But it's pretty much to say, stay in your lane. Sure, we're going to be accountable. You're managing, but you're not micromanaging. These are the 4 basic principles that the responsibilities of the government board should be following. Go ahead. The next one. The first one was stewardship. I did prepare for this, and I might get a little bit quick talking and skip over some points. So if I do, I hope Casey will fill in the gaps, or you'll ask questions at the end before I just out on it. Stewardship, this is the fiduciary responsibilities. A lot of this work is currently done by our trustees committee. It's pretty much making sure that all the assets of the church are safe, insured, et cetera, and it also helps to figure out what our assets are and to align God's people with those resources. So that's the stewardship responsibility. Next one. Part number 2. Strategic. Again, this is aligning the assets and making sure that they're leveraged to accomplish the mission and vision of our church. And to make sure that we stay within the core values of the church. It monitors the goals and makes sure that we have goals for our ministry teams. We make sure that we are meeting those goals. Otherwise, we realign. Make sure if we have to add some more resources, say this ministry team is unable to fulfill, get enough people, we could then say, hey, why don't you use the bus or something like that. So helping to realign the ministry teams to make sure that their strategic goals are met. That's the strategic side of it. So this is also probably where the pastor would bring in information as far as have there been new people visiting, what are the giving trends, have there been more professions of faith, all this stuff is analyzed, making sure, again, that those goals are met. So that's strategic side or responsibility. Generative, number 3, probably the most difficult, and that's because it's the newest. This is what some people would call futuring. It's looking at the big picture questions, discerning God's dream and the congregation's next steps. What is the community doing outside? Where can the church fill those gaps? Do we need to change our strategy? Some of these responsibilities commingle a little bit. So this is the new one that I think is also the most exciting, but also maybe the most daunting because it is such a different thing that the council will take on or the governing team will take on. And the last one is accountable leadership. This is where the rubber hits the road, so to say. Setting a culture of impact-focused ministry and be responsible for the mission. So if someone on this governing board does show up to the pearly gates and Peter says, what did you do to lead your church? This is where they would want to have the answer that yes, they did make the good changes, they're accountable for those changes, and they should be modeling that accountability for the other ministry teams. You hear accountability a lot during this whole SAS discussion, and it's a big part of it, but it's also nothing I don't think to be scared of. People want to be accountable for what they're doing, so it's a good thing. And modeling accountability, it's hand in hand with being a leader, so it's a good thing. This is also good thing. But I'll come back to it again. Let's move on. This is Casey was going to talk about the homework.
So the board meets every single month, like our current church council does. But once a year, the board spends intentional time together at a fall retreat. It could meet at a different time of the year, but if our year is conceived of as January to December, you're going to want to meet in the fall. And this is off-site. It's overnight. You bring in an outside facilitator to lead it. At this meeting, you do a little strategizing. Set next year's goal based off of the congregation's vision. During this meeting, the board works together to establish covenants. There are expectations, and each board gets to decide what their covenant is. One board might say, we covenant together to miss no more than 2 meetings of the year. We covenant to hold confidentiality. Kind of point. We covenant to read all the materials before we come to the meeting. Now, they just spend time creating that covenant together and then signing it. During this annual retreat, they will review and update guiding principles. This is like an intense time to go over policies, make sure that everything is still up to date, or if there's anything that needs to change, this is a great time to do it. This is also when we say, hey, what areas do we need to learn about in order to become better leaders? So throughout the year, the board will have time to learn little skills to help them be better leaders. And they'll spend time at every board meeting having about 15, 20 minutes of leadership equipping time. And so at the retreat, the board decides, what do we want to learn? And then we assign board members to teach it. So it's not a single person doing leadership development, but the board decides together, these are the skills we want to learn, and then we assign someone to take a different month, a different topic, to go find some kind of resource, bring it back, and to teach the whole group. And very similar with spiritual formation, every single board meeting, the board spends time feeding their own spiritual needs, and so they will choose the topics that they want to learn about, and a different board member will take a topic to share for a particular month. So there's a lot of shared leadership here. It's not like the chair does everything, the pastor does everything. There's a lot of expectation on each board member to help teach and be taught. During that retreat, it's also a time to bond a little bit. When you come to Sunday morning or to a meeting and it's just all business or it's just worship, you don't get a lot of time to learn about people as individuals. But if you spend 24 hours together out in like the woods, at a cabin or something, you're going to learn people a little bit better. And we also just want to have fun because part of God's dream in our creation is enjoyment. And so having a little bit of fun together is important. This is also a time when the board can do a prayer walk together, have a communion service, just a time to set them up really well before they are seated in January for the next year of work. Next slide. Back to Chris.
Well, Casey did a great job of organizing all this. I can tell it's my turn. So, very well organized. Thank you. So yeah, what's a board without a board meeting, right? So the packet. This packet is created ahead of time, sent out a week ahead of time to all the board members so they can review it. How many of you guys? Well, I'm not going to do a count of hands. We're going to say everybody has probably been to a meeting where there's handouts that you have to pick up. There are unrehearsed oral speeches or presentations given, and it's hard to look at the handout and it's hard to pay attention or look at the slide. What are you doing there? You're not absorbing everything efficient. So the idea is to make these meetings a little more efficient. That's why we have the guidelines in place. So this digital document packet is sent to the board members 1 week before the monthly meetings. It's assembled by the office administrator. Before it goes out, it is going to be vetted by the board chair and pastor to make sure everything's copacetic. It's going to include things like covenant, the agenda, treasurer's report, consent calendar, documentation required due to guiding principles, all the good stuff that usually takes up a lot of time in the meeting will just be already pre-processed by the board members. So that's what that is. Next slide, please. The consent calendar. So, all right, you're on board, you got the packet, you are, the meeting's on the calendar, and you've got all these different things that you're going to read over and mentally approve or bring questions up on. The good thing about this is, well, some of these items, like the last meeting's minutes, proposals from ministry teams, building use requests, all that stuff is now already in front of you. You don't have to talk about it in the meeting. And we'll vote. Can I have a motion to accept the consent calendar? Motion is seconded. All that stuff, it could have been a bunch of motions and a half an hour of work. It was just done in 5 minutes. So we can focus in on maybe some of the more meat and potatoes that we want to get into as far as leading this church. And that's where we get down into the governing board monthly agenda. The chair and pastor, as part of the packet, will set out the agenda, so there's no surprises. Everyone knows what's on the agenda. Any requests have already been made, so there's not going to be anybody raising their hand and say, hey, I'd like to add this. We know what we're getting into. That way, 80% of the board's agenda should focus on what's happening outside of the church. The good stuff, ministry, what we're here to do. Prayer, spiritual formation, and leadership equipping, rotate among the board. And there should be, I believe, the handout has a sample of what the agenda could look like, very rough. What I like about it is that there's timeframes on that. Not saying that we couldn't, our old system, put timeframes on the agenda. I like this idea. Next meeting. So I always have a secret agenda, hidden agenda, I guess, in my brain of how long each part of the agenda is going to take to try to get us done over that 60-minute time frame. You know, an hour and 45 minutes into it, I'm saying, where did I drop the ball? So maybe if I show everybody what my expectations are, we can try to stick to that a little bit better. But you could kind of imagine maybe 1/3 of the time is on spiritual, 1/3 of the time is ministry, 1/3 of the time is problem solving and generative work. So you can take those 3 things and try to divvy up so you're not just getting focused in on one thing. I've been to a lot of committee meetings. And one of the best parts and the worst parts is that people get passionate and start talking, and you go down a lane that you weren't expecting to go down. And it's not that committee's responsibility anyway. So why are we talking about this? But it's got such great energy behind it that we sit there half an hour talking about it. So this time frame will hopefully keep us keep the blinders on, keep us focused, and let the ministry team focus in on what they need to do. That's what you can see. Yeah.
I want to add something to the previous slide for just a second. When the chair and the pastor get together to create the agenda, there's probably a sense of, does this item need discussion or is it just a shoe? And if we suspect that it's, an easy thing, put it on the consent calendar. If there's something that we think, this is going to be discussion, then you would put it not on the consent calendar, but put it in time for discussion. And then when you're in the board meeting, the board guiding principles need to have some kind of way for a board member to remove something from the consent calendar, and the board can decide how that is. So maybe one person has authority to remove an item from the consent calendar, maybe two people need to agree to remove it. So there are ways to make sure that everything has discussion time as needed. Okay, next. So part of the agenda is reviewing the goals, and I just wanted to give you an example of what that looks like. So let's say, for example, that the governing board has set a yearly goal that this year we want to build meaningful relationships with 10 new adults. So at the May meeting, the Easter egg event just happened. And sometimes our report would say things like, we had 50 kids, and we did our crafts, we had so much fun, and we took pictures with Easter Bunny. It was a great time. That's often what church reports look like right now. In this model, we would say, if our goal is meaningful relationships with adults, we would say 23 adults attended our Easter egg event who are not currently connected to the church. 5 of those adults gave us their contact information, and the pastor is scheduled to have coffee with 2 of them. So the way that we report on the event is about how it connects to the goal. If our goal is to help children's hygiene, we might design the Easter egg hunt differently so that every kid who comes gets a hygiene packet to take home. And then you report differently based on what the goal was. So this is just a different way of thinking about events. You have a goal in mind, and then you report on the ministry based on how it's meeting your goal, kind of in that way. So, fun little example there. All right, next. This was a question that came up last week, a question about how is the board going to be communicating. When you have fewer people on the governing board, you need to triple the amount of communication that comes out of the board just to make sure that everyone gets a chance to hear. If you've ever spent time in classrooms, you know that you got to say things like 5 times before every student hears it once. Churches are the same. You got to send out information 4 different methods just to make sure that everyone might hear at one time. So that's digital, that's print, that's verbal. You got to do a lot. So at the end of every board meeting, part of the agenda is communication. At the end of the meeting, there is a conversation led by the chair that answers, what did we decide? Who needs to hear about this decision? And when do they need to know it by? What is the messaging of the decision so that we're all kind of speaking about it in the same way? Who's going to deliver that message? And what is the method to share? Is it an update on the website? Is it news? Is it a worship announcement? Is it a bulletin printed announcement? We need to make a video. There's a whole bunch of different ways, but part of the agenda is figuring out our communication strategies so that we don't make 5 decisions and no one follows through on sharing those decisions with other people. All right, next. Another strategy for board communication is a quarterly town hall meeting. This is something that SAS recommends the boards host throughout the year as a way of listening to the congregation and sharing information with the congregation. So early in the year, probably February-ish, you would have a quarterly town hall meeting. And during this time, you would present your new board members to the congregation, just to make sure everyone knows who the new leaders are. You could do it in January. You could do it during worship, actually like bless them liturgically in a ritual, just to set them up for a good year of leadership. You can also present what the board's goals are. If you recently approved the budget for the year, they can present the budget to the church. A little further along the road in Q2, you would have a town hall meeting to kind of give a progress report on the goals. You could have a question and answer time with the congregation, just some kind of a two-way communication method. In Q3, more progress on the goals. You might have a time of listening to the community. So in addition to listening to the congregation, you might ask the congregation, what do you hear is going on in our community that we need to be paying attention to? You give a finance update, just really anything that needs to be shared. And then your fourth one is your annual church conference, which, like I said this morning, is to be all church conference. So with that, you want to do the required business of the church, but then also celebrate your ministry successes and give gratitude to your outgoing leaders. Prayers of thanksgiving, gratitude to them. I'm going to invite Meg to come up. I think she's closing us out.
Yeah. I did notice that Mr. Chris said earlier, I almost brought it up, but sorry, the old voice ain't what it used to be. Anyway, I noticed that Mr. Chris said something about if you get to the pearly gates, you talk to St. Peter, and I thought, how about we say Nick? Anyway, all right, we do that a lot. So work. We're all used to the term committees. So work doesn't have a great connotation. So anyway, work groups are those short-term small groups that do the work as we said it in the service this morning. They are not. Oh, closer. You don't need to.
I know, that's why I told you.
I know. Janelle knows. All right, so yeah, they are not elected. Yeah, groups bring their work back to the board for review, adoption, blah, blah. Short-term, limited. Short-term, 2-month project. Short-term, 6-month project. I'll throw an example on the table. Doing an employee handbook, which is something that the SPRC has done. Okay, so another way I describe this, and based on my reading and what Casey has just said, think about what SPRC has, those specific projects.
Is there still questions on what? Or is that part still okay before we? I think we Yes. So the language is not important except to the degree that we understand what we're talking about. So ministry teams are ongoing, and they do ministry. Work groups do like the legwork that the board needs done. So if there are 9 people on the board and you need to hire a director of music, you don't want 9 people to write the job description, post it on Indeed, interview potential candidates. That's too many people. You would designate one person to take lead on it and say, go review the job description, gather some people, music stuff, bring us back a draft, approve it, and then go publish it, and then do a round 1 filtering of potential candidates, and then bring us back your final candidates, and then go interview and bring us your recommendation. So the board is never outsourcing their responsibility, but they are delegating some of the legwork to do. Perfect example of what you guys did last year was the Dundee Task Force. So the church council and trustees as a whole committee did not go to Dundee and research the property. They said, hey, Joe, Norm, you guys are going to be on the Dundee Task Force. Patty, you guys go do the research, bring us back your report and your recommendations. It's legwork, and these are really great opportunities to find those specialists and to have people involved in a short-term project you can't do like a 3-year commitment.
And a couple of the words that you'll see a lot in these resources is delegation, but not abdication. Okay, so, and that's where this comes in. Okay, so like Pastor Casey said, delegating, but not abdicating that responsibility. It is still the board's responsibility to make the decision. Okay, the other part of this is that this is another place where, as Pastor Casey said, you can find those experts in that area, plus people who are interested. Okay, so if there's something you're really interested in, then this is where you can be tapped to help out that specific thing on behalf of the board. Okay, all right. So then the board training. Think about the calendar. So the calendar is the nomination committee, leadership development committee will do its work in the early fall, come up with that slate, all right? And then at the all church conference, not the charge conference, per SAS recommendation, like we said earlier in the service, the recommendation is that it be an all church conference. That way everybody votes, all right? So then you have the all church conference where you vote on your slate of officers. At that point, then, that's when you do that first training, okay? That's when you first do that first training of your new officers. So think about this. If this church goes this direction, our first year, we're going to do quite a bit of training because we're going to have that 9-person board, all right? Let me back up. The nominations leadership development group has to do its work. They need to get trained too in this new scope, this new responsibility, looking at their job in a different way, as Pastor Casey kind of described in the service. So you start out with that, have your slate of officers, vote on it. You have your new group of leaders, you do the training. Folks start their term of office in January. Then you have that continuing work through the year. All right. So before January 1, when you start the new year, they want you to read. Okay. They want you to read this one. All right? Okay. I want you to read that. You're going to attend that equipping training. The book say 5-6 hours, something like that. It's going to be an in-depth look at SAS and the structure. All right? Led by the coach. And then also do the fall retreat.
I think one of the big takeaways for the board training is just to think that, you know, the first year that you do SAS, like all 9 people will be trained, right? And then the next year, well, we all know what we're doing, so we'll just bring on these 3 new people, right? No, they need to be trained too, so that they're not coming in with the old legacy model in mind. And then the next year, when there's 3 more, if you don't do training every year, then in 3 years you'll have a board of people who haven't trained on the new system. And heaven forbid they like learn some bad habits from the first year where we're still trying to figure out what we're doing. So just to know that every time there's new board members, there's intentional time to onboard them. You can't just push them into the deep end and expect them to know how to swim. So set them up for success. Okay, what questions do you have, either on what you've heard here or in the sanctuary, or really throughout all 5 of these sessions? Chris.
Sorry, it's not a question, more of an announcement. The council meets once a month, second Tuesday at 6:30 p.m. and everyone is welcome to come. I will try to get a link. We meet via Zoom see what the current structure is, how we run meetings. I welcome you to come. You might not be able to vote if you're not on the council, but you're welcome to listen in and contribute as much as possible. We'll have to better judgment on.
Yeah, so Chris has given an open invitation to come and watch the church council via Zoom. I will say though, as we've been studying SAS, Chris has been adopting some of the SAS principles that aren't, you don't have to adopt a different structure in order to adopt some of the little tidbits. And so it's going to look kind of like a hybrid right now because we're using some of the good stuff, whether we adopt it or not. Other questions? I've answered every question. I think so.
How are you going to, but I know you're going to have to start with 9 members, and then next year, how do you get rid of 3 people and add 3
Yeah.
more?
So Norma's question, you start with 9 governing board members. What do you do the next year? You gotta change 3 over. It is true that the first year that the governing board meets, 3 are elected for 1 year, 3 are elected for 2 years, 3 are elected for 3 years. That's the book of discipline method for starting a committee, is to elect them into 3 classes, showing that it's a 3-year term, but those first ones aren't considered 3-year term. I will tell you though, that if you look at our current committees, which are pretty lean because of COVID, maybe some other reasons, if you look at the current people who are scheduled to rotate off at the end of this year, regardless, and then you look at the people who are likely to choose to be on a ministry team rather than the board, we have about 4, 5, maybe 6 people who are currently on a committee who I think would likely apply for the board. And almost all of those next year would be their last year on a committee anyway. So I don't think we're actually going to feel like we're kicking people off early, just based on how our committees are right now. So people who would naturally rotate off this year, there'll be a few left who would be serving 1 more year anyway. They would probably be your first year board members. And then we have a few people on our committees serving this year who said they only want to serve 1 more. So all of that combined, I don't think we're going to be kicking anyone off that wouldn't already be accepted. I hope that's what it is.
So are the ministry teams going to have that same 1, 2, 3 year? Or do they?
Ministry teams do not use, they do not use class cycles. No. Think of them like unpaid staff. When you hire a youth leader, when you hire a music director, they're not hired for 3 years. They're hired for as long as they're doing a good job. And it's kind of the same for a ministry team leader. You can do the job as long as you're good at it. You can choose to quit anytime. Norm says no, but you can. And if there's someone else who might be interested in that role, then we can have a conversation of what does it look like to step out of the way so that someone else can have a chance to lead. Maybe after the ministry team for 2 to 5 years, maybe that person is ready to be on the government. Lydia.
Just to clarify the time, assuming that we vote yes in July, then you've got to come up with a slate of people and get them voted in before the retreat in the fall, right?
Yes, so assuming we vote yes in July, which we're not assuming, but in this scenario, if we vote yes in July, then there will be nominations training, nominations creates their slate, then we got to have charge conference or all church conference to then vote for the leaders, and then have a board training. Because it's our first year, we might have our board retreat in December. We might have it in January. I mean, we got to work with the fact that it's Advent and Christmas, so we'll just work to make it work.
So then, because we're starting this later than other churches, maybe here to work on rather than so our timing would be a little crazy this year. Than with
Maybe. I think we could ask for an early charge conference to make sure that there's plenty of time to get everyone trained. There's actually a good number of people in our church who have already read the really thick book, and so some people won't have to do that part. And some of them have also done the 5-6 hour training. So it's just making sure that all board members have those pieces. What else is on your mind? Huh?
It's probably all new to most of us, so kind of hard to visualize any question.
Okay. Yeah. Well, like I said earlier, things really clicked for me when I got to watch this accountability video, which was a mock governing board meeting via Zoom, and they were following a script. It wasn't like a real church governing board. And so I'm going to show that next Sunday evening and the Thursday after that at noon. And we'll also just have that video on our website. It's 40 minutes long, somewhat entertaining. Grab some popcorn. But yeah, either join me on Zoom to watch it, join me for lunch in the conference room to watch it, or watch it on your own. I think it will help visualize what a governing board meeting looks like, feels like, as well as the accountability process. Chris made reference to the fact that sometimes we'll get talking about a topic that has nothing to do with our lane, but it's fun, and so we just like go off for half an hour talking about it. There's some governing board members, governing boards who have adopted some kind of little something. There's one governing board I've heard of that got like this fake bundle of grass. They put it in the middle of the table, and when they start going off into the weeds, someone will grab it and just like start waving it. So it's just some kind of a visual cue that says, hey, we're off topic. You know, it's up to the board's kind of culture to figure out what's going to be our strategy to ensure we're not off our one. Other questions, concerns, comments, excitements? Yeah, Meg?
I guess I would say that for me, one of the exciting things is the very strong emphasis on the need for communication. And I know that here at my time at the need for communication has been brought up over and over and over again. We continue to communicate about that. You know, I'm not sure we got better, but I don't think we did. And so the accountability piece is obviously important. You know? And so when I think of communication and accountability, if people don't know what's going on, well then that's our problem. Okay? And we need to take that on and figure out what to do about it and then actually do it. And so I really like that.
In the past, I've seen churches, and I think we've done it too, I've seen churches rely on the council meeting as the place where you share the stories of ministry. And if you have like 9 people on a council and 80% of them have a spouse and 1 or 2 of them have children at home, you can kind of figure out that about 25 people by the end of the night do those stories, maybe. It's a really bad way to share the stories of the church. We need to be sharing the stories worship as like generosity stories, we're celebrating them as mission moments. We need to be sharing those stories in our news, putting them on our website, on our Facebook except to the degree that it's about there are other way better methods of sharing. And the video that they did for fish and food boxes for high school, that was an incredible way to share a story, to make sure that the story can be shared over and over again when someone comes in 6 months later and checks out the website. Other questions, comments related to SAS? Got all your questions in last week then. Wow. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer than is necessary. Again, for those 2 showings for the accountability video, the little demo, the governing board meeting, we'll have some more time after that for Q&A. I'm going to encourage all of our committees to talk about SAS during their June meeting, most of which I will not be available for. So it's a great time to talk about it behind my back. Use that intentionally. And I would love for your small groups to talk about it. If you want me or Chris or Meg or anyone to come and be a part of that conversation, just let us know. We'd be happy to chat with small groups. Thanks so much.